Welcome. My name is Robert Strand. I have the great privilege to be the executive director of the Center for Responsible Business. And yes, I love that. I like you a lot. And this is a CRB Peterson Speaker Series. And today is also very special for the Center for Responsible Business because it is our annual CRB community gathering. And that will be occurring in this room afterwards. So please stay on this afternoon and join us in community. We are so fortunate today to have Professor Andy Hoffman from the University of Michigan, who's going to come and talk about this excellent book, Business School and the Noble Pursuit of, and the Noble Purpose of the Market. I am going to save time by not introducing you. Andy, please do it yourself. You'll do a far better job than I ever would, and I don't even know where to start. You do so many different things at URB in Michigan, but we're so fortunate to have you here. And the structure will be that Andy will present on his book up front for roughly 30 minutes, and then one of our CRB Student Advisory Board members, Scout, is going to join Andy up here for a fireside chat without the fire, but we'll have a nice chat, and then we're going to open up for Q&A. Does that sound like a reasonable approach for today? All right, so please everyone join me in a warm upfront welcome, Professor Andy Hoffman.
What's your name?
My name is Kai.
Kai,
Yeah.
okay. Kai's going to advance the slide for me. Here at Berkeley, you guys can't afford remote clickers, I understand, or lapel mics, so I have to use this hand mic. Maybe we can work out a loan from University of Michigan to make that possible. Okay, so what I want to do is give you a sense of what I'm saying in this book. I want to give you two thoughts before I go. The first is, if you know anything about my work, one strand of it has been on why do people reject the science of climate change. I studied climate skeptics. And for that, I had the dubious honor of receiving copious amounts of hate mail. I have a folder for hate mail for doing this work. And when I got it, it confused me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to make sense out of it. Maybe I said something wrong. And then someone helped me through it by giving me a quote from Winston Churchill. He said, if you're not offending anyone, you never took a stand. And so if you're saying something that challenges the way people think or behave, you will get blowback, and you should embrace it. The worst thing that could happen after you're saying something you think is challenging, and people say, that was nice, let's go have a beer. You really didn't have an effect. So part of my goal here is to offend, to challenge you, to think differently about what we're doing in business schools. So that's the start. The second thing I want to say is I don't have all the answers. My goal here is to start a conversation. And so if you look in the endorsements on the book, what you're supposed to do is have all these endorsements say, this is the greatest book, you should buy it for all your friends. And there are some of those. But there's one endorsement on it that I'm particularly proud of because it is not that kind of endorsement. It comes from Andrew Carolyi, the dean at the business school at Cornell. And if you read on the back of the book, he says, there's as much I disagree with this book, sometimes strongly, as with which I agree. Yet this is a conversation we need, and we need to have it now. And that's my goal. So if I open up your thinking, if I open up a conversation, I have accomplished my objective, and if I've annoyed you, I've done even more. So there's a quote. Anyone's ever seen the movie First Reformed? If you'll, trigger warning, I'm going to say a bad word, but it's a total mindfuck. It's with Ethan Hawke. If you're interested in climate change, it's a movie worth seeing. And I read an interview with the director. And the director said something that I just thought was incredibly profound. He said, a great movie begins when the credits end. If you finish a movie and just forget about it, it wasn't a good movie. If you finish that movie and say, I got to talk about that, that was a good movie. Watch that movie. You will come out of it saying, what was that? So that's my preamble. Let me give you a sense of what I'm going to do. So, Kai, first slide. So business schools have started to really focus on the issue of climate change. And this is a good thing. When I got my PhD in 1995, I focused on business and environmental issues. And for the most part, when I knocked on doors at the school I was at, MIT, and at Harvard down the road, asking people to be on my committee, For the most part, they said, what are you doing here? This has nothing to do with business. Go over to School of Public Policy. I was able to form a committee, but it wasn't easy. My first job interview in 1995 with a top-tier business school, they actually said at the end of the interview, we really love your stuff on institutional theory, but we think you're too focused on the environment, and they declined me a job. That's 1995. Those very same professors who turned me down to be on my committee now list sustainability as one of their areas. That school that turned me down lists sustainability as one of their focal areas. The world has changed, and this is good. The rub is the problems have gotten worse, and they've morphed into something different. And so the approach that business schools are using to deal with this issue, primarily taking an elective and dropping it into a curriculum that remains unchanged, it simply will not work. There's many aspects of the curriculum we have to rethink if we're going to deal with this. For the most part, business schools are approaching climate change as a way to make more money. All we have to do is come up with another widget, sell it, problem solved. If I want to solve the climate change problem, by that logic, I'll go buy a Tesla or maybe another electric. I'll put solar cells on my roof, and I've done my part. And it's not that simple. I just don't think that it's a reasonable expectation that the fossil fuel industry is just going to lay down and die when there's enough windmills and solar cells out there. The problems are much too complex. And business schools typically treat this as a win-win. We can get rich and solve the climate change problem, but we have some win-lose challenges that I don't think we're preparing our students to deal with that requires a different kind of critical thinking, and in many ways, the elements of our curriculum stand in the way of their ability to do that. Hopefully, I'm starting to get people a little anxious. Let's keep on going. What is wrong with the way we're approaching this? Go to the next one slide, please. I think this is the question we should be asking. I've been focusing on sustainability for 30 years, and I've started to realize that the real question before us is what is the state of capitalism and the extent to which it is causing the problems we are trying to solve by dropping an elective into the curriculum. And I am not the only one that's saying is capitalism is faltering. You've got a number of quotes up here from people within the market. Joseph Stiglitz says that capitalism needs to be saved from itself. Paul Pullman, former CEO of Unilever, says it's a damaged ideology that needs to be reinvented for the 21st century. Peter Georgescu says it's slowly committing suicide. The variant we have right now, we need to rethink. I'm not going to make an argument for socialism. Relax. I'm not going to go that far. But I am going to say that capitalism, contrary to what many of my students think, is a set of human-made institutions designed to serve humans. And if it doesn't work, you need to fix it. This is even a place where I can quote Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson said, capitalism is a tool, like a staple gun or a toaster. If it's broken, fix it. And that's what we're facing right now. The two elements I think are important to think about what's wrong with capitalism. Next slide. First, in the natural environment. I told you that business schools are starting to focus on climate change. They're approaching it as an environmental issue, but it is no longer an environmental issue. It is a systems breakdown. And it is one of several system breakdowns that are happening right now. We have grown to such numbers, our population has grown to such numbers, our technology to such power, that we are altering global systems. Think about this for a second. I was born in 1961. There were 3 billion people on Earth. Today, there's 7.5. And if I live to 2050, I'll see 10 billion people. So it took Homo sapiens millennia to go from 0 to 3 billion, and in my short lifetime, it's gone up more than double. The impact on the environment is enormous, and we are now in the Anthropocene, the age of humans. We have now an animating force in the environment, and it's not just climate change, it's species extinction, it's nitrogen and phosphorus in the environment, it's fresh water availability, it's just ocean acidification. These are systems breakdowns. And so merely treating it as a market opportunity fails to capture the scope and the challenge that's before us. Next slide. We can also talk about income inequality and the extent to which that has grown to levels we have not seen since the Gilded Age. The amount of money that is aggregating in the hands of a powerful few is quite startling, and that's the important point. It's not just that some people are becoming extraordinarily wealthy, but they have a disproportionate influence on the political process, and they become disconnected from the world that the rest of us live in. There is research to show that as you become more wealthy, you become less empathetic. Elon Musk even said recently that empathy is a weakness in the American culture. That should alarm us. And the extent to which they influence the political process, but they don't understand the reality that many people live in. I don't know if any of you saw this, but during COVID, David Geffen put out a post. It seemed like a nice post saying, "This is where I'm quarantining. I hope everyone else is safe." I don't know if any of you saw this. It was a picture of his $450 million yacht parked in the Caribbean, and he got attacked for it. The key is he didn't see it coming. He did not realize that that would be so offensive. And so this is a concern as well. And the important point is this, income inequality, and the environmental issues on the previous slide, these are not externalities. These are not unintended consequences. These are a product of the system as it is designed. And if we want to have a properly functioning economy, a properly functioning market, we have to start to examine how does capitalism work, what form will it take in order to deal with these challenges of the 21st century that our graduates are going to inherit. How are we going to prepare them for that? And the problem is, next slide, our business schools are also faltering. They are stuck in a mode that hasn't changed for decades, and we know this. Whether you go back to Warren Bennis's article in 2005, or more recent studies saying that, for example, the industry of business education is wrestling with basic questions of purpose, positioning, and program design. If you're not familiar with the first name on that report, that's the dean of the Harvard Business School. Other schools saying the same thing. We teach innovation, but we ourselves rarely innovate. And European schools are following that model. And so we are stuck in a mode teaching a form of business, a business model that is out of date. It is not fit for purpose for the 21st century challenges that we're facing. That is the issue before us. That is what we have to think about if we're going to properly work in things like climate change and income inequality into our curriculum. To drive the point even harder, and I told you what my goal was to offend, take a look at the input, the throughput, and the output of what we create in business schools, and you will see a problem. Next slide. Input. Students who apply to business schools score higher than students on the rest of the campus on what's called the dark triad: narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy. At Ross, at the University of Michigan, we have the Ross School of Business. What do the other students on campus call students at the Ross School of Business? They call them Rossholes. The University of British Columbia, I made that remark. They're called the Sauder School of Business. Students on the rest of the campus call their students Sauder snakes. Is there a nickname for Haas students? Haasholes, okay. Where does this come from? Why is that there? I have the movie poster for Wall Street up there. How many people have seen Wall Street? I've just split the population by an age demographic. My students have never seen this movie. If you've seen it, it's a movie by Oliver Stone. It's a morality tale of the greed and the excesses of Wall Street. And the lead character is named Gordon Gekko, and he gives a speech in the movie that has become very famous. It's called Greed is Good. And Oliver Stone wrote that speech wanting us to hate Gordon Gekko. He wanted us to loathe him. He actually based it on a speech by Ivan Boesky, a corporate raider who actually went to prison. The problem was Michael Douglas, who played Gordon Gekko, delivered that speech with such gravitas that both Michael Douglas and Oliver Stone in interviews have said, people have come up to him and said, that speech made me want to go to business school. And like, no, that's not what we intended. That's what people think business is. That's who we draw. There's the input. What's the throughput? Next slide. There are studies to show that a 2-year MBA makes people more selfish, and they self-monitor. They care more about what other people think of them. And you know what the primary metric of that self-evaluation is? Your salary, money. I see that at graduation time. They measure their worth by the salary they're getting. And they will take jobs that may not make them happy, may not give them meaning, because it makes more money. If you're not familiar with the book Bullshit Jobs, that's what those are. You can get paid a lot of money to help someone dodge their taxes. You can get paid a lot of money to do something that provides very little meaning to you, very little value to society. And you know what? At business schools, we like that because it boosts our rankings. So there's the throughput. What's the output? Go to the next slide. This is a study that came out in NBER in 2022. And they looked at businesses in the United States and Denmark, and they split them into two samples. Those that were run by people who went to business school, and those were run by people who didn't. Over 5 years, no difference in revenues and profits. Over 5 years, the major difference, those that were run by people who went to business school, labor wages went down 5%. 6%, I think. 6%. They did what they were taught to do. They made the system efficient. They did what they were taught to do. They screwed people. And in an operative line at the end of in the article, it says, our estimates correspond to causal effects of practices and values acquired in business school. This is what we teach. We are teaching people to do this. How do we stop it? There's the question before us. I have not yet seen a business school that has actually said, you know, our graduates caused that financial crisis in 2008. Really sorry about that. We're going to do our best to make sure that doesn't happen again. I have not seen a business school do that yet. How do we change that? If you've seen surveys, Gallup just had a survey come out about 4 months ago, rating different professions on whether they think the people in those professions are ethical or honest, and less than 10% of the American public think that business executives are ethical or honest. This is the world we're feeding people into, and I believe we are contributing to it through the degree programs we've created. If I haven't offended yet, I don't know how far to go. I want to start there just to get the conversation started, because I'm not here just to be the prophet saying the end is near, repent. We have enough of those. I want to try and offer a way forward that I see just to start a conversation. Next slide. First of all, our students are there already. There are numerous surveys to show that our students are starting to get frustrated. They're looking for purpose. They're looking for ways to work on the problems that they are going to inherit. And so those are all these surveys here, and they're starting to speak out. I don't know how many of you saw this. I'm sure you did, because it's right down the road. Last spring, Poets and Quants had a series of articles from students at Stanford saying, we're not learning anything. There are things we want, we're not getting it. I've heard it from students here. I've heard it from students at Ross. If it's happening at Ross, Berkeley, and Stanford, it's happening everywhere. And there is a generation that's coming in and saying there's something that we want and we're not getting it. This article in the Financial Times in the upper right says that this generation of business students are the most challenging generation business schools have ever faced. And they're getting very frustrated at the kind of education they're getting, and they want something different. If you want to read two really interesting articles, that one in the middle, The Bankrupt Ideology of Business Schools, was written by a student from the Sloan School of Management while he was a student at the Sloan School of Management, and totally rips the curriculum. The one below it, a student from the Harvard Business School. Again, totally ripping the curriculum. They're starting to speak out. The students we are drawing are asking for something else. That's an opportunity to try and provide what they want, and quite frankly, what the world wants. Next slide. So, what do I have to offer? Well, I did get an opportunity to spend 1 year at Harvard. Take the word Harvard out of it, doesn't matter, but I had 1 year just to write a book. Harvard has too much money, and they threw some of it my way, and so I had no obligations other than to sit on that ridiculously opulent campus and work on a book. The important thing, though, is the institute was called the Institute for the Study of Business and Global Society. To me, there's the question before us. That's the question we should be asking. What is the role of business going forward? What is the next variant of capitalism? What form might it take? And so I wrote this book, and those are the 9 sections in it. I'm going to walk through them really quickly just to stir a conversation, and then Scout and I will have a conversation. Next slide. So first, what is the future of shareholder capitalism? I love this quote from Joseph Stiglitz saying, I think we have 4 decades of this experiment, shareholder capitalism, and I think we can call it unambiguously a failure. The rub is, everybody in this room knows only one variant of capitalism. We've all lived in this world of shareholder capitalism. My students are really kind of perplexed and puzzled when I show them there was actually a variant that preceded it. There will be a variant that follows it. Capitalism is not like the law of gravity. It is a set of human institutions that will evolve and continue to change, and we should direct it in the way we want to go. And so these are the questions I think we should be asking and engaging our students on. Next question. Next slide. Return to fundamentals. I teach a course called Re-Examining Capitalism. First class, I walk in and say, please define capitalism for me. And they can't. Students from a top-tier business school cannot define capitalism. And yet surveys show that very same generation is becoming disenchanted with capitalism, and they can't define it. That's a failure on our part to properly train them on what is capitalism and how has it evolved. How do we think it through? And more importantly, I'd like us to train our students to think of themselves as stewards of the market, to have a responsibility to make sure that the institutions in which they will practice their craft are working properly for a balanced, fair, sustainable, and not necessarily in the environmental sense, but just in the social sense, a sustainable economy that allows everybody to realize their potential, whether they do that as business leaders, as voters, or just educated people at a dinner party. I want our students to be able to talk about things, so expose them to people like Adam Smith, Karl Marx, Mariana Mazzucato, Joseph Stiglitz. I can go down the list. Teach them to think critically. What is capitalism? What should it be? How has it evolved? What does it need to be? Where is it failing? How do we fix it? We need to bring that into the curriculum. Next slide. Teach about capitalisms around the world. This slide is up there not just to appease Robert, but, you know, we look at what is the measure of our economy. Well, it's GDP, of course. Leaving aside the fact that the gentleman who invented GDP, Kuznets, said, do not use this as a singular metric of national economic health. It measures some things and it leaves a lot of things out. And somewhere we missed that message along the way. And so United States is number one in GDP, go USA. Then we start to look at some other metrics. Our GDP per capita, we're number 10. Our social progress indicator, we're number 28. In fact, just last year we dropped to the second tier. And our Gini coefficient, we're number 114. And then we can look at a country like Denmark, which has a variant called Nordic capitalism, which Robert will talk about tomorrow. Its GDP is 38. Now, who wants to live there? Oh, but wait a minute. GDP per capita, number 6. Social progress indicator, number 2. Gini coefficient, number 8. And now you can start to think differently about how you consider the economy and the various ways you can set up a capitalist economy. Capitalism is not just one type. There are many ways to do this. And again, my students are thrown a loop when they learn that there's American capitalism is very different than Nordic capitalism, very different than Chinese capitalism. There's a variant of capitalism in China. And they didn't know this. They don't understand this. And we need to teach them that and think about it carefully. Next slide. We need to rethink the purpose of the firm. I could walk up, I'm willing to bet on your campus, I can do it on my campus, I can do it in downtown Berkeley, I can do it in downtown Ann Arbor, I can take this mic and walk up to anyone and say, finish this sentence, the purpose of the firm is to, and they will repay back, make money for the shareholder. What if I were to tell you that that is actually not a legal standard? There is no law that says you have to make money for the shareholder. I teach this to my students. I'm getting the same look I'm getting from a couple of people in this room. Either I'm lying to them or everyone else is. But it is not a legal mandate. Even Sam Alito in the Hobby Lobby case said companies do many things besides make money for the shareholder, and they have every right to do so. We don't teach that. And in fact, most of our students don't have any idea of the origins of that idea. They've never heard of transaction cost economics. They don't understand the idea of the corporation as a legal fiction, as a nexus of contracts that leads to this definition. And quite frankly, it's not a very useful definition for a practicing manager. It may be helpful for economists and their equations, but if you're going to run a business, this doesn't help. Peter Drucker used to say the purpose of the firm is to identify and serve a market. That makes a heck of a lot more sense for a practicing manager. Colin Meyer, the CEO of, the dean of the Said Business School, the purpose of business is to produce profitable solutions to the problems of people and the planet. These are definitions that are much more useful and, quite frankly, much more accurate. And we need to put to bed this idea that it's only the shareholder, because we could also go into that. What kind of shareholder? Which shareholder? Well, it's usually the short-term one that doesn't really care about the fundamentals of the company, only wants to make money in the next quarter or even in the next week, and they're gone after that. We just had Paul Pullman on campus, and he said, One problem with this idea is that maybe Milton Friedman was right when he came up with it. In those days, we had shareholders. Today, we have share traders. And they don't care about the fundamentals of the company. And if we make ourselves beholden to them, we will destroy those companies. And so how do we rethink that? Next slide. We need to re-examine the corporation as a natural person. I can ask my students, do you hate Citizens United? They all raise their hand, yes. What do you think about the idea of the corporation as a natural person? And they look at me, what are you talking about? And they don't understand the precedent that lead up to that goes back 100 years. There are certain rights that corporations should have that you and I have. They have the right to be sued. They have the right to write contracts. They have the right to protection from illegal search and seizure. Do they have the right to free speech? Is spending money an exercise of that free speech? Does the presence of money connote influence? The Supreme Court has some opinions on that we should be discussing and debating because they matter greatly for not only the role of business in society, but the stability of our democracy. Do they have the right to religion? This is where a lot of people start to melt down and say, wait a minute, this has gone a little too far, especially my Fords and students just are scratching their head going, you guys are crazy. At the end of my class, I teach a course, this re-examining capitalism class. At the end of the class, what do the students think of it? And a lot of the foreign students saying, I don't want to live in this country. You guys are crazy. This is part of it. But give students the foundations to understand where this comes from. Next slide. Start to think about the proper role of business and government, proper role of government in the market. We give this very little attention. I'm stunned how few schools have courses on lobbying, much less lobbying for the public good. What a bizarre idea. I teach a course called Business and Democracy. It's joint between the Ford School of Government and the Ross School of Business. Halfway through the class, I had the students, what do your peers think of you taking this class? And the business students said, a lot of our peers said, why would you take a course on government? What does that have to do with business? Which is astonishingly naive. The students from public policy, the students from government, their peers actually said to them, and I'm not making this up, they actually said, you actually went in that building? You actually took a course there? They're the enemy, don't you know that? Which is also astonishingly naive. How do we bring the two together to teach students the importance of government in the market, move beyond these binaries of either more or less government, either neoclassical or Keynesian, and start to think about what's the right balance between these spheres? There is no serious economist today that would argue that a market absent any kind of regulation will yield outcomes that are in this public good. We need to start to think carefully, where does the government have a role in the market? And all lobbying is not just a bunch of fat cats sitting in the back of a room smoking stogies and dividing up all the spoils among themselves. Businesses provide value to the policy process within certain guardrails. How do we think about what those are? Next slide. Are we feeding the problem? If you're not familiar, this article from Sumanta Ghoshal came out in 2010. Bad management theories are destroying good management practices. Are there things we're teaching that are actually making things worse? I think there are. We teach that technology will solve all our problems. Is that true? I don't think so. We teach that efficiency is always good. Is that true? If it makes a product cheaper, it's good. If you can make cheaper cars by moving manufacturing overseas, that's good. I think the MAGA voter has a little issue with that idea, but this never comes into our calculations. Maybe it would be good to move manufacturing overseas, but what about the communities left behind? It doesn't even factor into our analysis. How do we think about that? Our metrics, such as GDP and discount rates, should be interrogated. GDP measures merely the movement of money. Good or bad, it makes no difference. It doesn't care. How do we rethink that? Discount rates. Yeah, $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow, but should we use that in all our estimates? Nicholas Stern stirred a healthy conversation on this when he calculated the cost of climate change. He used an absurdly low discount rate. He said there are certain times where discounting is inherently immoral. Let's say we just use straight line depreciation, 10%. Everything 10 years out and beyond is worthless. It doesn't show up in our calculations. Is that true? That's called your future. But I'm sorry, not in my time frame, so it's gone. Does that get in the way? Yes. Give a critical examination of it. We teach competition as conquest and domination. This book, Hardball, I tried to find the most ridiculous example of this. And this is a couple of people wrote this book, the Hardball Tactics. You should enjoy watching a competitor squirm. You want to dominate. You want to control. You want to exterminate your competition. Are those kind of metaphors really helpful? On many issues that require collaboration, pre-competitive cooperation, how do we think this through? We should stop teaching the cynical view that people are inherently selfish. If you don't see that embedded in the curriculum, you're not taking a closer look. We do teach a very Hobbesian world, a very cynical world. How do we move beyond that? Break down knowledge silos between disciplines within the business school and the broader university, and start to think more about systems thinking and bring that into the curriculum. Next slide. And then my final bullet, I think we need to start to teaching business students a different sensibility in how to run businesses. And so I've started another course. I've become a course manufacturing machine over the past 5 years called Management as a Calling. And my students respond to this to really get them to look inside themselves to see what kind of business manager they want to be, what kind of legacy they want to have, what kind of way can they serve society and make a difference in the world through business, because the power they have to do that is enormous. But one of the problems within business schools is we spend most of our time looking at the how of business, very little time looking at the why of business. Why are we doing this? What is business for? What is your role as a manager for? If it's merely to make money for the shareholder, I've taken away all your agency. And you merely have to be a slave to that share price. But you have more latitude than that. And so how do we bring that into the curriculum? This, I think, is a very important question. Next slide. And it's part of a broader conversation. Derek Bach, Harold Shapiro, David Brooks, Anthony Kronman have been writing that we as just institutions of higher learning have lost their way. We used to provide people with opportunities to examine and develop a meaningful philosophy of life. We don't do that anymore. We provide skills for people to get a job and make money. That is a problem in the university overall. I think it's even more critical that we bring this kind of thinking on character formation into the business school, because the power that business schools will have to influence society is enormous. Our graduates dominate our social life, our economic life, and increasingly our political life. And we need to create more wise leaders that go from there. Next slide. This comes from Rakesh Khurana's book, came out in 2010, From Higher Aims to Hired Hands. If you haven't read it, he looks at the history of the American business school. And the business schools were first proposed in the early 1900s. Most universities said no. This is not a serious area of academic inquiry. And they said, no, we're going to teach the titans of industry how to lead commerce and service to society. We're going to teach business people in the same spirit we teach doctors to serve society. The conclusion of his book is we've missed that mandate. We've gone from higher aims to hired hands. We teach people how to make money with no concern over the higher ambitions of business as a noble service in society. How do we bring that back? There's the challenge. There's what I'd like to bring in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy.
Oh, you're going to stand.
That was fantastic. No, I'll sit. Okay. I'll get up here with you. Yeah, thank you so much for that talk. Very inspiring. We chatted a little bit last night and had the pleasure of having dinner with you and some other CRB students. And before that, I think I said to you just how much your writing and your book put into words things that I had been observing in my business school education here. So I wanted to thank you for that, and I wanted to just say that to everyone here, because this for me is very real, right? And so I'm a second-year MBA. Who am I? My name is Scout, and I came to school because, particularly an MBA, because I felt like business was ruining the world, and I wanted to understand why. And that's why I'm here, and I have way more questions than I have answers, of course, but your work helped me articulate and understand some of what feels like it's really rotting right now in these educational institutions, in this system of capitalism that is designed, right? And I think it's really important for us to acknowledge that. So I have so many questions for you, and I'm sure certainly other people do too. But I would love to start with, we have students, we have administrators, we have professors in the room. What is your message to them? What would you implore them to do? And beyond that action, how will they know if they're really pushing the envelope versus just tinkering at the margins, versus just layering on sustainability as like a case study in their classes? Like what is, maybe this goes back to your earlier quote, but what shows us that we're really pushing the boundaries?
How much time do we have for that question?
As much time as you like.
Okay, so students, what I would say to students is threefold. Number one, business schools are broken. Number two, go anyway. The power you have to make a difference in the world is enormous through business. But number three, do not be a passive consumer of education. Take control of your education. Make it what you want it to be. I'm stunned how few students take full advantage of the opportunity they have to drop into a place like Berkeley or Michigan. You are dropped into a research-rich environment, and the opportunities you have to ad-lib, to improvise, to make the education what you want to be are literally limitless. Organize a conference, invite a speaker, do an independent study, take seminars in other schools, take classes in other schools, get out there, make the education what you want it to be. I heard it so many times, students come to graduation time, I wish I'd, and you fill in the blank. And so that is number one. For the faculty, institutional change is hard. The inertia is enormous. I'm not naive. I've been doing this for a long time, and I know the challenges of trying to change an institution like this. But it's thankless work. Administration is thankless work. But I begin with my senior colleagues, and I challenge them. The word I've used is I want you to be an elder. And what I mean by an elder, and I got this from David Suzuki. I saw an interview with him, and he said he thinks of himself as an elder now. Stop thinking about your own success, your own metrics. I do not need more citation counts. And in fact, when I come to the end of my days, I am 100% certain when I look back and say, did I live a meaningful life? Citation counts and H-index is not going to be what's top of mind. But when we have tenure, when I'm tenured chair full, I can define the professor any way I want. And that doesn't mean go out and play golf, but change the institutions through which the next generation comes up. And that's what I'm trying to do, and I'd like to see more professors do this. Unfortunately, and this is the words of a colleague of mine, he says the problem with our field is we've got too many senior professors thinking like junior professors, continuing to chase more citations. And it's an illness as far as I'm concerned, because there will be no end. It's like always wanting more money. You're not going to get to a point where you can suddenly say, I'm suddenly validated, I have the success. And then junior faculty, recognize that the system is as it is. You've got to play within the system, but keep that side of you alive that can start to take full advantage of the benefits of being a full professor. Deb Meyerson at Stanford has this idea called tempered radical. Be tempered, succeed. You got to get tenure, but be a radical. Hold some ideas at variance with the dominant norms, and as you advance in your career, you can start to bring those out. So there's a start. How do you know if you're succeeding? I don't know. You make difference in your sphere of influence, and then hopefully it starts to grow and build. I'm giving this talk here. I have no idea if it's going to make a difference. I feel like Don Quixote. I genuinely do. What I'm pushing against is huge, but if I just plant a seed, it will grow someplace and someplace else and someplace else, and I'm hoping I'm on the crest of a wave at the front of it, and it's going to break and it will start to grow, not just through my efforts, but through other people who feel the same way, and will start to spread. This book has gotten some really nice play. I was the keynote at the AACSB Deans Conference, so I had 900 deans in the room reading them the Riot Act. I'm going to do it again for EFMD in Seville in June. So I become the resident critic, which is not my personality, and this is very uncomfortable for me, but your fate takes you where it goes. And I did not expect this, but here I am.
Thank you for that. And I do just want to highlight also what you said at the beginning, which is that if you have the hate mail, right, or you have people who are pushing back against you, then it means that you are taking a stand.
You know, there's another quote. Paul Newman has a quote. He says, if you have enemies, you have character. There are people with enemies that deserve them. You could be an enemy because you're an asshole.
Sure.
But you have to be careful how far you go with that metaphor. Just because people don't like what you're saying doesn't mean you're right.
Certainly, that's true. But I think at least in my time here, something that, just speaking from my own personal experience, when I do ask questions in class, like, can we talk about stakeholders, right? Instead of fiduciary duty and just being beholden to shareholders, sometimes I will get students who are like, thank you for asking that question, that's really helpful. And then sometimes there will be students who are like, hang on a second, what do you mean? Right? Like, I don't quite understand. And so for me, it's receiving maybe questions is the better, or like engagement is the better term. And when I get that type of response, it feels like to me, okay, I'm going down a path that people want to go down, that people are engaged around, even if it is slightly uncomfortable, right?
And I would add that as a professor, I shouldn't be afraid to bring up questions that I don't have answers for. Yeah. Is sustainable consumption possible? I don't know. Does that mean we shouldn't discuss it? Absolutely not. Is endless economic growth possible on a finite planet? I don't think so. What's the alternative? I don't know. Let's discuss it. We should not be afraid. I mean, professors like to have all the answers. There's nothing wrong with standing in front of a classroom and saying, you know, because we do it all the time, what do you think? You know, there's a tactic professors use all the time. That's a mask because they don't know the answer. But there's nothing wrong with not knowing the answer. And so I think that's important. Management is a calling. It requires a different mode of teaching. I don't stand in the front. I'm not the knowledge expert. Their students have a better sense of their calling than I do. And everybody's calling is different. So my job as a professor now morphs from the knowledge expert to the systems architect to create an environment in which people can feel comfortable and safe to examine what their purpose is. I think that's both very critical, and I think it's very hard. It's very hard for me not to walk into the room and be the dominant alpha male in the front of the room. That's my role as a teacher. And now I have to back up and be more supportive and be with them. And that is very hard to do. And I know a lot of my colleagues would be afraid to do that, couldn't do that. But, you know, the threat knocking at the door, the barbarian at the gate is AI. And if we're merely transmitting knowledge, AI can do that for us very nicely, thank you very much. But if we're going to get more relational in our teaching to mold character, and I think that's especially important for undergrads, they're so vulnerable at that stage in their life. And if we're merely teaching them that it's all about money, we're really dooming them to a very difficult start in life. We need to change how we teach.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. And I want to maybe just double click into the language that you use. And we talked about this a little bit last night, but you have these words, right? Purpose and vocation and calling. And these are all words that sort of speak to a higher purpose. And you also shared some anecdotes about how students are, even in your presentation, are seeking that higher purpose, right? There's a hollowness, maybe, that I think some of us are sensing, particularly people of my generation. I think the message was like, you grow up, you get a good job, and you buy a house, and you have a family, white picket fence, right? Well, I certainly cannot own property here in the Bay Area. But, you know, that's maybe tangential, but it is related to this narrative, right? This like broader cultural narrative that we have. So I'm wondering if you could speak to your experience working with students to understand their purpose, and in particular in business, where it feels like it might be kind of a soulless place, right? What does it mean to find purpose in that?
But that's the key. It doesn't have to be. You can have a very meaningful, satisfying career in business. That title of the book is not lightly considered. There is a noble purpose in business. Capitalism has done amazing things for us. Our life expectancy is longer, our standard of life is bigger because of the market. I could see some people rolling their eyes, But the market is the most powerful institution on earth. You can lament that fact, but it is a fact. And so we have to steer it towards solving these problems. I personally do not think there's any way to solve climate change except by steering the market to solving it. But it can't just be because I'm going to make myself rich. Mm-hmm. It has to be towards a higher purpose. And so I've definitely hung on words purpose, vocation, calling, discernment, because I want this to be a personal experience. When I first got it going, I was telling you that I approached the Leadership Center to see if they would just house what I was doing. And they said, we will if you change the name to self-leadership. And I said, absolutely not. That's not what this is about. This is about finding meaning in your work. Because at the end of the day, if you find meaning in your work, you will do it better. You will dive in more deeply. You will commit yourself to it, much more so than for a buck. And it will be something that you will look back and say, I have a legacy that I'm proud of. And that's at the end of the day what life is all about. There's a hospice nurse named Bronnie Ware who she wrote a book because she talked to a lot of people who knew they were going to die. And what were the top regrets of people who knew they were going to die? The number one regret: I wished I'd lived the life I was meant to live, not the life that everyone else thought I should live. That's the number one regret. And I tell my students, I want to save you from that fate, because you are in an environment right now that's channeling you towards consulting and finance. If you don't know that, you should know that. And if you want to deviate from that, it's going to take a little extra effort. And if you just go passive, you will end up at McKinsey, whether you like it or not. And will that be the place where it brings you the most meaning?
Yeah, I could definitely go down this road of death and purpose, as you're aware. But I want to just also ask you, do you encounter difficult conversations with your colleagues about this, about the ways in which you're pushing these institutions to be more beholden to a positive future for their students? And in those conversations, what do you say, right? Like, institutional change is hard, that's an excuse, or I'm sure you come across many. And how do you reframe that in those conversations without losing them?
Well, I mean it's important to come in with some humility, first of all. I don't have all the answers. Yeah. I've had some very good conversations with colleagues that have strengthened my thinking and feeling this. Interesting, there is a lot of research on the idea of calling a vocation. One I think is very important is that if you do sense you have a purpose or calling, you're much less defensive to criticism and to challenge. Because this is not about me. This is about what I'm trying to do. And so if you show me a better way, I'm going to be totally open to it. I don't get defensive. And so, I've had colleagues push back and say, Andy, but some people come to business school because it's a tool of upward mobility. Yeah, it is. I would like to think you don't have to sell your soul to have upward mobility. I've had some colleagues push back and say, no, business is only about money. We're going to have a good conversation. Or I have had colleagues push back and say, I'll stop teaching that people are inherently selfish when you prove to me that they're not inherently selfish. And we can go down that direction. I think it's important to expose these underlying beliefs and values. I've had colleagues push back and say, Andy, I'm not comfortable bringing values into the classroom. And I just say, you already are. And if you don't know that, we've got a problem. And so many ways it's just, let's flesh things out. And maybe sometimes I'm wrong. And that, take out the word maybe. Yes, sometimes I'm wrong. But how can we together solve the problem that we're facing? Because we do need businesses to step up to these challenges. How are we going to produce the grads that are going to do that? How are we going to cultivate wisdom, character, judgment, and not just how to expediently make more money, or worse, well, I'm just going to rape and pillage for a few years, make my billions, and then I'll become a social entrepreneur and make a difference in the world. I don't buy that model either.
Yes, the conversation about the golden handcuffs did come up briefly during dinner last night. Whether that is actually what ends up happening when people enter those jobs or not, there's still a lot of moral ambiguity, you could call it, in deciding to take that path. I mean, philanthropy in and of itself is like a very broken system that we do not have time to go down in this talk here. But I wanted to ask another question, and then maybe we'll open it up to the audience, because I'm sure people will have additional questions. But just going back to this question of purpose, mostly because it really resonates with me. I think it does resonate with students that I've spoken with, this idea that what am I doing here, right? Like, what is the point of all of this? What am I producing or consuming for? So I'm just curious to hear from you. What do you think your purpose is here?
It's an important question, and it's one that can't have a glib answer or a quick answer. I think, when I first started the management of the calling program, I brought Paul Pullman in to open it, and he says he's still looking for his purpose, and I think it's a never-ending pursuit. Mm-hmm. And I think the key is that you go down steps, and every step you take, it exposes the next horizon, and you move along. If you had shown me 50 years ago, sitting here, I'd say you got the wrong guy. I would never feel comfortable standing in front of a group and talking like this. But I went down a path, and I've recently, Carl Jung, I think, is great for reading some of this stuff. And he has a whole vein of his thinking that you as a child actually has a clear sense of who you are. And sometimes society gets in the way. And if you look at a child, what brings them joy or what is their aspiration when they're young, very often that's it. And then society starts to get in the way. When I was young, I grew up in Boston. I wanted to be John F. Kennedy. I really did. I wanted to inspire like John F. Kennedy did. I didn't want to philander like John F. Kennedy. I wanted to inspire like John F. Kennedy. And I actually started going down the politics route and realized it wasn't for me. And then only like 6 months ago, I had a revelation. I'm doing it. So my purpose is to inspire change, to inspire education, to step up, to inspire my students. I don't think we do that enough. We speak mostly to the head, we don't speak to the heart, and we need to encourage our students, inspire them. And so I've become John F. Kennedy, despite myself. Well, thank you. I've never said that in public before. But it was a revelation for me. And I just sort of found my way here through a path that I didn't preordain, but every step made sense, and here I am. So there's my purpose.
And we are so grateful that you are here. Yeah, thank you. Do we have some questions from the audience? We do. And it's Mike, Robert is kind enough to run the mic. Thank you. Yeah, you got it.
Could I swap with you? Yes. All right, I got my Nikes on, so please. Just want to see if there's any current students at UC Berkeley. We're all equal. Some are a little more equal than others in our current students. We'd like to start with you, if you kindly would. And if you're willing, please say your name and what school you're coming from.
Hi, my name is Jess. I'm a second-year MBA student right now. Thank you. I'm feeling super energized. My jam is purpose and values, and I've spent most of my career in some way or another working with young people who want to explore more of that in their work. And one of the things that I have thought a lot about is how much that language has changed in the past 10 years, and how 5 and 10 years ago we were talking a lot about purpose and meaning. Whether that was purpose washing or real is a different conversation. And what I've seen in the past few years, especially post-COVID, is just complete draining of that as a actually articulated priority. And I'm starting to hear now a slightly different conversation come up with AI. And I would love to hear you speak a little bit more to the moment that we're in and sort of how you're seeing the prioritization or conversation around purpose, meaning, and calling, whether you also feel like that's changing, and if so, in what way?
Well, certainly the word purpose has become saddled with baggage once certain companies realized that that's what students were looking for. They started to sell it, and they started to dilute it, and they started to pervert it. And that's true with any terminology. Sustainability, now everything's sustainable, nothing's sustainable. So how do we keep ahead with the language to make sure we focus on what matters? I'm also, and this is a conversation I've had with many colleagues, that in times of great uncertainty, does the idea of pursuing a calling sound like a luxury? Or is it a luxury only for students at schools with more opportunity, like Haas? Those are fair questions, and I'm not going to give you a trite answer to that we do have to examine it. But I don't think we need to give up on the entire idea. Certainly, if you have to put food on the table, having your purpose becomes a little less important than putting food in your mouth, or more importantly, food in your children's mouth. But at that time, does your purpose shift? Now my purpose is to provide for my family. Now my purpose is to pay off my school loans, but not lose sight of it. I've had many students come to graduation. They come into business school, I'm going to change the world, I'm not going to worry about salary, and then graduation time comes and they're looking at, this salary from McKinsey with an absurd signing bonus, and they say, well, I've heard this many times, I'm just going to take that until I pay off my debts, and then I'm going to have back to my life is all about. And I said, that's great. Put up some guardrails. Write a letter to your future self saying, okay, Andy, you're 3 years out. Did you accomplish your goals? Is it time to shift? To have some people that will push back on you and say, okay, knock on my door in 3 years and say, Andy, you said you were going to do this. Hopefully you have a partner who's going to do that and say, keep you honest. Retreats, back up, re-examine. Am I on the path I'm on to be on? This is something that you will develop through your whole life. And many of my students want to hit the bullseye on the first job. You can't. If you hit the target, you're doing great, and then work your way towards the bullseye. It is, to channel Viktor Frankl, it is the essence of what your life is all about, to find that purpose. And so if you're facing struggles on clarifying it right now, recognize the reality, the environmental reality you're in, and make the decisions necessary, but continue the pursuit. I feel like I'm circling around, but if I gave you a quick pat answer, it wouldn't be an honest answer.
Please, right next door.
Hi, I'm Ishita, also at Haas. I'm thinking about how to put those values and that purpose into practice once we graduate from business school. And you're right, a lot about business school pushes you towards certain industries and certain organizations. And I'm wondering what are we able to do to create a community then of students who've internalized the things that you're teaching and are seeking that out, are working on it. I found it really hard to kind of just scrabble through everything and really find who's doing this, find that community within business school and outside of it. I'm not sure if the answer is to create a pipeline, a community, but what have you seen to be successful there?
Well, the students at Ross have the benefit that I've created the community forum. If they take the class, then I keep them connected through a LinkedIn page, and I keep in touch with them. I bet there are students all around you that are thinking about these things. How do you find them? There's the question. How will you find that you're about to graduate? How are you going to find them at work? Create a book club on purpose. See what you find. I don't know. You're going to, you came out consummate networkers, right? Now network on purpose. Try and find them. There are ways to do it. I also want to just point out something that's interesting, is that the questions are all focusing on the management as a calling, not the whole rest of the book. That's one chapter out of, I think, 12. I just want to call that out for what it's worth. It is something that resonates. So I'd be stunned, genuinely stunned, if you weren't surrounded by classmates who are interested in this topic.
I'm just going to take a quick moment to plug the Beyond Capitalism Club. We are having a screening next Friday at the New Parkway Theater, so if you want to join some fellow students, you can find me or Margot after this event, and we will give you the invite for that. And there's no barrier to entry. You can be in that WhatsApp group for as long as you like.
That's awesome. And Beyond Capitalism Club, of course, Margot here, Scout up here, and we're also very proud members of the CRB Student Advisory Board. And as you know, our mission, the CRB fosters a vibrant community at UC Berkeley dedicated to advancing responsible business, really leading into this community aspect. So I'd like to think that we're in part responding to your calls for action, Andy, here today. Please.
Hello, thank you so much for being here today. My name is Marilee. I'm a second-year undergraduate here, studying business and public health. I was really curious to hear your quote you just said about Elon Musk not thinking empathy is important.
And there's another one. Who's the tech bro that said this introspection was a waste of time? Anyone know who? Someone said that too.
Peter Thiel?
Was it Peter Thiel?
I don't know.
I mean, these are...
Oh,
okay.
that one.
Okay,
Mark
yeah.
Andreessen.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Say it loud.
Yeah. Yeah, that just floored me because I think empathy is so crucial to business in particular, to my life. Shout out to Professor Ross back there with the Chris Kindness Club, and we're working on kindness in particular. Is there ways in particular you think that empathy can be integrated into the curriculum? Because I do see it come through in extracurriculars and personal development, but where are the opportunities for empathy in the business curriculum in particular?
I want to be careful, because if I walk in here saying I have the silver bullet that's going to work on every business school, you'd have every right to dismiss me. The context here is different than at Ross, is different than every business school is different, and so it requires, to my mind, a careful examination among the faculty over where is it finding its way in. How do we define rationality? Rational is what makes you more money, right? Well, actually, no. I mean, we teach negotiations. I used to teach negotiations. If someone puts an offer on the table that's going to make you better off, it's irrational not to take it. But if I put an offer on the table and start insulting your mother, you have every right to tell me to go stuff it and walk away. But we don't teach that, because now you lost money. I have a student that came up to me a couple of months ago. He went through the management of the calling program, and he said, I just want to thank you. I said, for what? So I was looking at 2 jobs. One was in San Diego. My wife and I know nobody there, but had a lot of money, a lot of status. Second job was in Minneapolis. Less money. I like the job better. Our family's there. We took the job in Minneapolis. Before, of course, I wouldn't even have considered it. Money was the metric. You know, there's no, it's if you've seen the commencement speech by David Foster Wallace, I mentioned this to other people, this is water. You know, and the metaphor is you get these 2 little fish swimming along, and a big fish comes the other way and says, enjoy the water. And 2 little fish swim a little further and say, what the hell is water? If you don't know the water you're in, you will follow it. And so helping students call it out, but also having a conversation about it, just exposing it. It's not like something you have to totally eliminate. There are places where you are selfish. There are places where you are just transactional. When I am negotiating with a car dealer, it's going to be transactional. I don't want to make friends with a guy. I just want to buy my car at the cheapest price I can. Understanding when that's in place. As a manager, you know, going to the earlier question, I have a student who's now at Deloitte, and he's rising fast. He says his purpose is to cultivate his employees. It's not to become a partner. In fact, he doesn't want to become a partner because he will lose that connection. And he wants to really connect and help people advance. That's his purpose. What a beautiful purpose. You can do that anywhere. You can do that at Deloitte. You can do that at Whole Foods. You can do that anywhere. If you bring that spirit with you and don't let the school squeeze it out of you.
Open up to everyone, please.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Karen. So it's a great pleasure to meet you, Professor Hoffman. Not to bring attention to another great university, but I want to provide context of my question. So I'm a Michigan alum, and I study at a school of education right next to Roscoe Blue. I also took some MO electives, although back then we don't have your management as a calling class yet. But I'm now at Career Services at the Haas Undergrad Program Office. I'm helping undergrad students to find jobs, of course. And of course, every day I would face the tension between a student's value and those prestigious roles in banking consulting that dominate campus recruiting. You challenged faculty to be elders just now. I like that term. But for staff member like us, our role feels a little bit transactional. And so my question is, how would you advise administrative staff like us embody that similar elder role to help students navigate the tension? And then if there is any, we already talk about change happens slowly in higher ed. If there's any administrative ritual that either all the way from orientation to graduation that you would recommend change to better foster a sense of calling, what would you suggest? Thank you.
With that pause, I'm just going to say, go Bears. You got to come with it.
Let me fish around and see if I get to where you want to go. I was quoted in Poets and Quants saying, let's blow up the curriculum. That's the headline of the story, which I mean it. But I mean it in a way that we need to really think the entirety of the ecosystem of business education. If it's merely saying, okay, we've got 2 years, we've got 4 quarters per year, we've got 8 quarters, we've got 4 courses per quarter, there's 32 courses, how do we chunk those 32 segments and create a degree? We're missing the point. What happens in the co-curricular space? What happens in between classes? And what happens through encounters with the staff who are so important to a business school, any school, who are often overlooked, are part of the educational experience. And so how do we think about it in different kinds of chunks and different kinds of bites? I just spent some time at IMD in Switzerland, and they have recreated their structure where they have at the beginning what they call transversal skills. And these short modules that will span the entire curriculum. Climate change is one of them. They actually take their MBAs, you can do this in Iceland, they take them to the top of a glacier with a glaciologist and say, okay, this is climate change, this is what it's doing. AI is in there. Not just how to use it, but this is what it does. This is how it works. Here are its limitations. Here's what you can do with it. I would like to put calling in there if I could. So if there's no course on helping students cultivate a sense of empathy, a sense of calling or purpose, can you bring it in to your department to help students examine that? It can be done in short doses, it can come long doses. Are there ways to bring it in? Are there short weekend seminars? There's so many ways we can totally restructure how we deliver but also cultivate content. It's not just me as the knowledge expert. You know, there's a term for this. It's called the knowledge deficit model. Your brain is half empty, mine is full. I take my knowledge, I pour it into your brain, you will think like me, and you'll make good decisions. We have a lot of professors who think that way. That's not the way the world works. And so how can we include you as staff and all the staff into the educational component to deliver a clear, coherent message? I recently heard a speech by David Brooks. And he said something that just really stuck with me. He said there are certain students, you can meet certain students, you can tell they went to a certain school. How do you know that? It's not just what they know, but their sense of place in the world, the sense of what the world is about, how it works. And he says, how is that done? And he says it's done by a cohesive moral culture. All the pieces have to fit together. And so how do we select our students? How do we socialize them in orientation? What are the courses they take? What are the values embedded in there? Whose names do we put on buildings? Who are the speakers we bring in? Who are the exemplars we hold up? All of this has to fit together. These are all opportunities for learning. And if we want to take that seriously, that requires another step, which I would not want to take on. But getting all the faculty, all the staff together to say, this is the kind of person we want to cultivate. This is the kind of person we want to graduate. I can't imagine getting faculty to agree on a sentence like that. But can you come up with a statement like that saying, these are the kind of people who want to graduate. When people come out of Haas, we want them to see their place in the world like this. And if you can create that vision, then you can actually all have a common goal and try and meet that goal. But going back to the earlier question about purpose, too many business schools are just as guilty as businesses saying, come to our school, we will teach you business and you'll be a change agent. Now get back to your class and balance that spreadsheet and focus on the shareholder. A lot of schools are using this topic as a way of branding, but do you really mean it? It has to be embedded in everything. That's David Brooks's point, and it would be embedded in what you're doing as well.
I would love to just add briefly, I'm not an undergraduate, but as an MBA student, I would say that the staff at the CRB, I mean, Robert is faculty, but also heads up the CRB, but a huge shout out to Natalie and Persis for what they've done to really embody the defining leadership principles that we have here at Haas. The DLPs are ideally, they create that cohesive moral culture that you're naming, right? Which I have a whole side note about whether that's actually happening, but my interactions with Natalie and Persis and Robert have helped me really understand those principles and really be able to have a bedrock in order to operate from. And I don't know what I would have done at this university had I not been able to work with them. So I'm sure that there are students that you interact with that you make a real difference in that interaction. So.
Natalie and Persis, sorry, Andy, but you deserve a round of applause. I couldn't agree more, Scout. Our wonderful colleagues back in the back.
I hesitate to say this, but when you have a Center for Responsible Business, does that mean that the rest of the business school is not?
Yes.
Next question, please.
I think I just got fired. Jim's my new boss as the faculty director here. So I'm going to go to this back of the room. Is there any questions in this? And then I'll move to you, Francesca. We'll count you.
All right. Thanks. My name is Francisca. I'm an alum, and I was here before there was a Center for Responsible Business. Maybe the whole school was not, or was totally. Who knows? I wanted to pick up on some of the earlier slides that you showed and kind of zoom back out from the individual to the business school and back to the market. And I'm actually challenging you to step even beyond that to look at what we call the economy overall. You're still saying it's correcting the systemic failures of shareholder capitalism, and you had that one slide where it said kind of the blank capitalism might be the future. How about looking even beyond? Is it maybe late-stage capitalism now and something post-capitalist could be coming up? Because a lot of the points that you listed, to me, are very similar to arguments made by alternative economic approaches, especially well-being economics, that center people and planet and not that much growth metrics like GDP that are inherently too narrow. So I wanted to do that. And before I let you answer that, you also had the elder analogy. A similar one would be the being a good ancestor that the British philosopher Roman Krasnarek, who also happens to be the husband of the donut economist founder Kate Raworth, brings up, and I think that's also a good mindset. But coming back to kind of going beyond the capitalist economic viewpoint.
Yeah, I only recently heard that idea of being a good ancestor, and I love that idea because it speaks to legacy, it speaks to contribution to society. But to your first comment, I mean, I don't think we know. I mean, Thomas Kuhn wrote the famous book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, where you have a model, you have normal science, and then you have a disruption, and you have a period of chaos and confusion, and then out of it comes a new normal. We're in that period of confusion right now. I think we were in it before Trump, but Trump has shuffled the cards, or more accurately, he has chucked the cards. The cards are all over the place. And they're going to get put together in some form. What will that be? I don't know. I do think that we as professors and as academic communities, whether it's just at Haas, whether it's all business schools, whether I don't know who, should not be afraid to make an aspirational statement that this is the kind of world we want, and these are the kind of graduates we want to create to get us there. When we do that, then we will lead towards a conversation. To my mind, the important conversation. I can probably pull up the table of contents right now, without having seen them, of every one of the top journals in my field. And you will look at the titles of the papers, and you will wonder, what in the world are they talking about? Their questions don't have any bearing for business. These are the questions that matter. We're a professional school. We've lost connection with the profession. These are the kind of questions we need to ask. So I don't have a clear answer for you, but in that period of chaos that Kuhn talks about, there are multiple models that emerge, and they all compete for space, and something will come out at the end that will be some kind of amalgamation of all those. So there are a lot of models being tested. You brought up donut economics, that's out there. What will the outcome be? We have a role in forming what it's going to be. I have a slide, it's not here, that I show with my students, and it's my grandparents. And my grandmother was born in 1899, and she died in 1995. So she saw the advent of indoor plumbing, indoor electrification, first flight, first car, man on the moon. She saw all that and more. And if I showed her the world she would die in when she was the age of my students, she'd say, "You're crazy, that's never going to happen." If I could show you the world that our students would die in, they would equally say, "You're crazy, that's never going to happen," and it will be more because it's going so fast. The important question to ask them is, what role do you want to play in making it the world you want it to be? So there's the question before us. It's not predicting the future, but playing a role in making it the future that we want it to be. And I think we, as institutions of higher learning, and more precisely business schools, have a role to play in making it the world we want it to be.
We're nearing the end of our time. I want to give you a moment to offer any final remarks that you'd like. A small plug. Thomas Kuhn, of course, wrote The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. Here, exactly, here at the great University of California, Berkeley. In your department. I love that about Berkeley. I love that. Michigan's a great school, but God, I love that about Berkeley. So many wonderful discoveries, so much great research that's been done here over the years. Scout, would you like a final word? Andy, is there a final? So then we'll give it to Scout, our wonderful CRB Student Advisory Board member, offer a final word, please.
Okay, this is a very Scout-coded comment, but the ancestor and the idea of being a really good ancestor for 7 generations is one that's been prominent in Indigenous communities since they've been here, since they've begun, right? So I think maybe this is something that in the Western world we're just now getting to, but that idea of stewardship and truly thinking about ourselves as many, many, many generations down the line is something that has been here. So I thank you for everything, for thinking of yourself as an elder, for really trying to model that for your students and your colleagues. This is, I think that this is the real question, and this is the question, the idea of purpose and what role we will play is the question that myself and my colleagues are going to come up against over and over again. The world is irrevocably changing, right? It has changed, and nothing will stay the same. So we're going to have to figure it out. But I feel a little bit better having your words to help guide me and redirect me when things feel a little challenging. So thank you so much for being here, Andy.
And my good colleague Natalie, are you going to put the QR code so that we can get some survey response here? And please join me in thanking Scout Expert Moderation. Andy, thank you so much. And Natalie and Persis, you wonderful human beings, thank you. And thank all of you.
Thank you, Robert.